Welcome to Female Fluence. We are a place of women empowering women. This is a safe environment where females are not judged nor afraid to flourish. My goal is to help you live an energized life of balance, whether as a mom, a wife, or in your profession. It is time to have self-worth and self-compassion. Live in the present moment and surround yourself with only healthy connections. So join me, Promash Shur, a woman empowerment life coach, an educator, and a mother of three, to help take you on a journey of true identity and inspiration. Living in a world where various disabilities exist presents unique challenges. One of the most daunting is a journey towards acceptance. Embracing one's disability marks a courageous leap into a new way of life, showcasing incredible resilience and strength. Suppressing emotions and denying the reality of one's condition only exacerbates difficulties. Yet, what about disabilities that aren't readily apparent, like dyscalculia, which impedes mathematical learning and comprehension? Today, I'm honored to introduce Michelle Steiner, a remarkable individual who navigates life with this hidden disability. Her journey with this disability has been a lifelong process, demanding the acquisition of diverse skills and the rejection of limiting beliefs. Rather than succumbing to the notion that her disability defines her capabilities, Michelle instead has chosen to explore alternate avenues to achieve her goals. Her contributions extend far beyond her personal journey. As a disability writer, advocate, and paraeducator, she has shared her insights and experiences in various publications, including the Mighty Nonverbal Learning Project and Dyscalculia blog. Through her own blog, Michelle's mission, she empowers, educates, and uplifts others facing similar challenges. Moreover, her creative talents shine brightly through her photography, which is featured in Word Gathering and Independent, offering a unique glimpse into her own perspective. Michelle, thank you so much for being a guest on Female Fluence today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
We're going to dive into a little bit. If you can tell us about your childhood, and then when did you start having difficulties at school, and how old were you when you were first diagnosed?
Sure. Well, my name is Michelle Steiner. I live in Pennsylvania with my husband, Ron, and our two cats, Jack and Sparrow. And I am a paraeducator in a school and with students with disabilities and some who don't. And I also have a blog called Michelle's Mission, where I write about life with a learning disability and I feature my photography. My experience with having a learning disability started whenever I was in kindergarten. I was my parents' first child. My brother didn't come along until 13 years later, so they
Wow.
didn't have a whole lot to base on what typical childhood development was.
Right.
My preschool teacher could start to see that there were some things I was struggling with, but my parents thought, well, I'll catch up, and they sent me to kindergarten, and I was really struggling when I was there. I struggled to tie my shoes, counting, anything math related was hard. Dot to dot pages were really difficult. And my teacher saw that and she recommended that I get tested for having a learning disability. And sure enough, I have one. And during that time period, they didn't give specific names for it. We knew about dyslexia, but we didn't have anything with dyscalculia or anything like that. So it was more of an umbrella term. They
Right.
knew I wasn't going to be a mathematician whenever I was 5 years old. That's pretty much all that they could tell at that age. I had to repeat kindergarten the following year, and I was sent to a different public school, still in our district, but it was just different. And I began to receive specialty services. And school was a real challenge for me, especially in the early years. I struggled socially because I went to a very small school district where I couldn't hide. Everybody knew I went to learning support, and the bullying really started when I was
Mhm.
very young and I was different. And I also struggled academically. I can just remember being a young child and wanting to not only fit in, but I wanted to be able to learn and understand information and make my parents proud, which they
Yeah.
always were. But I just thought, okay, this is life is always going to be really difficult for me. But as I went through school, it got a little bit easier for me. A lot of those accommodations started working. I was able to be in all regular ed classes except for math and resource by the time I was in high school. Socially, it got a lot harder because school groups became more
Yeah,
defined.
that's what I was gonna say. I said high school is normally very difficult. So when you throw
Mhm.
something else as an, a disability into it, I just can't imagine what you went through and how, I mean, kids at that age can be quite mean, right? So how did that work
Definitely.
out for you?
That was really hard because everybody had that peer group, and I just didn't feel like I fit in anywhere, and nobody really seemed to like me. So what I started to do, especially after the bullying really intensified, and I had some death threats from one girl. Luckily, it was only
Gosh.
just words, but and nothing ever happened with that. But I can remember I started hanging out with a group of peers that were from a neighborhood school district, and these kids didn't know anything about me. And it was an art group where I wrote for their newsletter and did some other things. And I found acceptance through that group. And when that group stopped meeting, I found another group that was an adult writing group. And people were just a couple years older than I was, and they were my friends. And they got to see me grow as a writer and as a person. And they would pick me up and take me places. And that was really helpful because I I'm not able to drive because of my disability. And my peers were like, "Well, aren't you driving yet?" And they were like, "No, I'm," you know, they accepted that, and I really didn't feel like I was missing out.
Right.
And 20 some years later, we still meet and talk about our writing, and we're in each other's lives, we're weddings and parties and just
Oh,
all
that's
kinds of things.
amazing. That's so it was like a true bond. And it seems to me that writing and art really saved you during those years, right? Because you're a very creative person and you're very
Hmm.
talented. So you were able to connect with other kids who were in that same area that they were interested in art and writing and make a connection versus, what you were doing on the outside, you weren't driving, you were maybe not partying
Hmm.
like the other kids, all that teenage crazy stuff. Um, so how would you
Yep.
say this your disability has affected you as an adult? I mean, I know you don't drive, but in what other ways has it really affected your life?
It has affected my life with going to college. Even getting to college really affected that too. I had a learning support teacher who didn't think I could go to college because of my math problems.
Mm.
And I even had a psychiatrist as an adult after I graduated, got involved with Office for Vocational Rehabilitation. I had to be tested for having a learning disability again. And I've never been a great test taker, and my scores were really low on my test. And the psychiatrist who evaluated me said, "I don't think you're going to be able to go beyond a community college." And then at another point, they told me, "Well, we don't think that you could get a job like with writing news reports or things like that because that would be beyond your capabilities." And just hearing all those things was really difficult. But
And
I,
not to interrupt you, but I feel like
mhm,
I really I don't understand that, and it really bothers me because I hear so many stories
mhm,
like that. I have friends that have autistic kids, and it's like from the beginning, it's like the professionals kind of just say like, this is it, like, I don't think you can do anymore, this is all we see for you. And I just feel like whether that is the truth or not, we should kind of leave that to the individual to kind of, because
yes.
once someone plants that seed and says, oh, I don't see you doing anything with your life, like, this is it, this is like, that just kills all your goals and dreams, and you don't even want to try. But if you kind of leave it out in the open and you just say, we're going to take it one day at a time, we're going to take steps,
Hmm.
and we don't know, they're the future, the possibilities are endless for you. We don't know yet what you're capable of, but the only way you're going to discover is by trying. So to do that to a young child, and I hear this happening a lot, I
Mhm.
just really disagree with it because I'm so glad that you decided not to listen and you just said, no, like, I have these talents. I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to see what I'm capable of.
I agree, because everybody should have the opportunity to try.
Yeah.
And that's what I set out to do. And it was really difficult. When I got to community college, there was still a stigma attached to disability
Mhm.
accommodations. I thought, oh, I left all that behind in high school. Well, not really. I still had people that said that that was cheating or giving me an unfair advantage. I
Right.
had another advisor who told me I was going to have limited job choices. And I didn't use a lot of the accommodations. I my grades really suffered from not using them. And I was really negative for a number of years. And thankfully, I had a professor in a class I was struggling with said, "Why don't we at least get you extended test time?" And I decided to do that. I was able to pass her class. I didn't do well at it, but I was able to pass. I got my associate's degree in early childhood education, moved out on my own and had independence, which was really important. My
Of course.
especially with not driving. I love being able to go where I needed to go. I had temp jobs and I liked my life, but I just always wanted more for myself. And for financial reasons, I had to move back in with my parents. And during that time when my job was downsizing, I thought, I'm going to give university a try. And I found a program that had the least amount of math and science possible, had a program that interested me. And I used all the disability accommodations. I got a note taker, I had extended test time. And I wasn't ashamed to go up to my professors and tell them who I was and that I had a learning disability and these are the services I'm going to need. And I did experience maybe some people that thought that they weren't fair. And I had a lot of professors who were understanding, but I always got one or two that didn't quite get the memo, but I knew how to handle it. And this time around, it was so much better. My grades improved, and I even made dean's list for a semester.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I graduated with a bachelor's degree despite being told that I couldn't do it. Uh, Employment has also been somewhat of a challenge at times. A lot of places I went to said, "Oh yeah, we're disability friendly," and they turned out they didn't understand learning disabilities, and that presented some challenges as well, and things didn't work out. A lot of times, it can be hard at my job because people can't see my disability, so I have to be the one that says, "I have a learning disability.
Right.
I
It's
cannot help
invisible,
you with."
right? Because they think you're pretending, you're trying to take advantage
Mhm.
of a situation, which makes it even harder, right?
Exactly. So I have to, and all the kids know, do not ask me for help with math or they'll soon find out. But a lot of times people, yeah, they can't see it, so they don't think that that exists. It can also create difficulties with the not driving, but I have a wonderful support system. My husband's able to take me to work in the morning, and I have a great coworker that takes me home at the end of the day, friends and family that can take me wherever else I need to go. And they also live really close to a lot of things. So I'm able to walk and I get to take pictures on my walks. And if I was in the driver's seat, I couldn't
You
do
couldn't
that.
do it. So that's where your love for
Hmm.
photography comes through. Now you
Yes.
mentioned, I know since you don't drive and you walk a lot, I know you
Hmm.
mentioned that your journey, there was a section I was looking at one of your blogs, said that it has been a lonely one because if people didn't have a disability, they didn't want to be around you. You compare this
Hmm.
to walking your path by yourself. Having a disability has been like walking a path set out for me. I did not get to choose walking this route, but I cannot wear off of it. Instead, it's a course that I need to manage. Can you provide further details regarding your path? Because I know it's been a lonely path, but somehow
Hmm.
you have been able to, I guess, maybe take a different route, right? So it's not as lonely
Yes,
anymore. So for someone else who might be in your same situation, how can you give them that motivation to take the right path and not give up?
exactly. I did not get a chance to choose having a disability or not having one. That was the path that was set before me. But I got to look at the path a lot differently. Whenever I was really young, it just seemed like it was really overwhelming and seemed really lonely and scary. But as I went through life, I started to be able to not necessarily choose that, but there were some other things I started to see a lot of beauty. I could see flowers. I could see other people started coming along and they walked alongside me. And that made all the difference. And I also got a chance to choose maybe I couldn't choose the path of having a disability, but I could also make some changes that I wanted to do and choose, okay, I want to go to college. I don't want to go to trade school like people think that that's what I can do. I can choose going in that direction. Or I can choose that maybe I don't want to have a job where I'm going to stock shelves, but I can choose to
Right.
go and get a job working with students as a teacher's assistant. And that really helped me. And it was also not giving up. I think that was a big thing too. I couldn't necessarily always choose every single circumstance, but I could choose how I decided to walk on that path and how I viewed it as well.
I love it. I think you are such a source of motivation. And I think it's all about perspective. You
Hmm.
chose to change your perspective. So the path that seemed really dreary and
Hmm.
alone and sad, all of a sudden, you were seeing the birds and the flowers and you're taking
Yep.
pictures and once you
Hmm.
change your perspective, you had better motivation so you could
Yes.
do better with your life. Now, Michelle, I know you also mentioned that you have limited hand dexterity. What does that mean?
That means that I have with my hands, they don't quite work very well with my fine motor skills. It can be really hard for me to unlock doors. It can be really difficult for me to open jars and lids. And then sometimes things will just fall out of my hands. And it can also affect my handwriting. I didn't know that until I was an adult. And I had another learning disability evaluation that I even had that. I'll never forget. I had to put shapes in a shape sorter, and I was blindfolded when they were doing this. And the evaluation takes 8 hours for everything. And I was ordering in food, and there I am signing a receipt blindfolded while I was putting shapes in a shape sorter. So I can only imagine what the delivery driver was thinking. But once I found out that I had this, all of a sudden it made sense why my handwriting was so
Mm.
awful and why things fell out of my hands. I wasn't just being clumsy. I had limited hand dexterity, and it just things started to make a
Is
lot more
that part of the
sense.
reason that you can't drive, or it's also because of the numbers that you can't, see the signs or your
Um,
driving speed
that's
or
actually that is actually visual perception, but that's
okay,
not with my eyes, that's with my brain. So it
okay,
affects my reaction time because I can
reaction
remember when I
time.
was in gym class, I it was a real struggle with me with eye hand coordination. And then we knew with driving that this was going to be something that we were going to have to take some considerations. So my mom and dad had me wait a year before we attempted any kind of driving. And then they had me try to mow the field. We lived down in the country and we had a riding lawnmower. And instead of having beautiful long straight lines, I ended up having circles. So they look like crop circles. So I always joke around that we now know where crop circles come from. And I also
That's a good experiment before they got you on the behind the wheel, right? It's much
right.
safer.
And then they did get me behind the wheel of the family car. We had a really long driveway, and my mom said, "Oh, do you want to drive?" And we went up the driveway, and I thankfully she was in the car with me because I almost crashed into our garage. And at that point, my parents thought we got to see what's going on. So I had a driver's license evaluation. I passed every single part of the test. I knew what to do if you had a flat tire. I knew the responsibilities of having a vehicle. My eyes were fine. I had really good vision. And then we got to the part where they did the visual perception, and they
Yeah.
said, based on this, we just can't recommend it. And it felt like 100 pounds of weight were just being lifted off my shoulders because the last thing I wanted to do was hurt myself or somebody
I'm
else.
sure you were scared. You wanted to attempt this, but it's like, those are one of the things but I mean,
Hmm.
luckily in this day and age, it's like we've got walking, we have Uber, there's
Hmm.
so many services that some people who
Yes,
drive, a lot of people choose not to drive anymore because traffic is a nightmare, right? And cars are
exactly.
expensive. So it all works out. Now, um, When do you think it was a moment where you decided to kind of, because I feel like when we have, either trauma or something that's really bothering us, in order for us to actually heal, is acceptance, right? So if you kind of deny it and say, there's nothing wrong, I'm fine, or just kind of put in the back burner and not talk about it, not explore it, not study it, and you just try to fight it, it won't, you won't be able to live to your full potential. So at what point did it kind of click and say, I mean, I know as a child you were diagnosed, but all of that throughout to actually fully accept it and say, this is what has been given to me. Now I have to find a way to live my life with it. When was that point, and like what happened when it triggered for you that, I just need to accept in order to move on and heal myself from within and not be shameful about this disability that I've been given?
That was in my late 20s when I went back to university. And I started thinking, this is what I have to do. I have to go and get the accommodations. I have a disability. And slowly I started accepting that and being comfortable with speaking about that. And I had a department that really helped me with that. I knew people that went through it before, and it changed their perspective. And for someone that had a disability, it changed mine. And then when I got I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I was really like, I was on top of the world. I thought, okay,
Yes.
I have a disability.
And
That's
you
not going
should be,
away.
exactly. And did you see how, like, when
Hmm.
you were in high school, you didn't wanna accept the accommodations, you were embarrassed, you were hiding it out,
Hmm.
so you weren't doing really well. As soon as you said, "Okay, this is what I have to do," and you changed your perspective and you accepted it and became really self-aware, everything started changing for you.
Yes, it did. I wasn't ashamed of having that disability. And that it took me another couple years to really write about it, because I had friends, my adult writing group, that said, you really should write about having a
So
learning
that was a very
disability.
healing, right? And because writing, I mean, we
Hmm.
journal, we write, it really helps us feel better, so I'm sure that was a huge part of your healing process.
It gave me that voice. And when I had that first article published, my inspiration was, we bought our house, and my husband and I did, and I could not open the front door with the limited hand dexterity. And there was a prompt on the Mighty about what's a seemingly easy task for other people, but it's really hard for you. And I wrote about that. And I had such a great response that it just encouraged me to write more. And there were certain times when I would put stuff in my writing, maybe I couldn't say something to somebody in my past that really hurt me, but I could put them in a character, and that gave me a voice, and I could forgive somebody. And I never thought I could forgive this person, but once I put it in a story and I was able to say what I was really feeling, that's what helped me. And when I started writing about the disability, that also helped me too, because all of a sudden I had other people saying, that's my experience. That's my life. And that
They could
encouraged me to
relate
write.
to you, yeah.
Yes, and that encouraged me to write more articles and to start my own blog as well.
That's remarkable. Now, how has this disability affected you socially, like friendships, and how did you meet your husband? So how did that work out? Because, now you're happily married and you have that support that you need.
Mhm. Socially, it was difficult, especially when I was in high school. That was probably the most difficult years for that, not having really a connection with other people. I was really lucky to meet my friend group and to be friends with them for a number of years, and have them accept me and to work through a lot of that. They changed how I viewed myself and just my worldview. It can be hard though, especially not everyone's like that. Sometimes I was around people that maybe weren't always the nicest with having a disability or about giving rides, and people would say, "Oh, you're lucky you don't have to drive," or "It's annoying that you don't." And that can be hard too. But most of my friends definitely have been there for me. Getting married, that was something. I can remember when I was doing my internship, I had a person who told me, well, you may not find somebody because of having a disability. And she was right. For There were guys who didn't want to date someone that had a disability. Some just told me straight up, I don't want to date you because of this. And that's all right. I'd rather know
Yeah,
than
right.
really get my heart broken. And I can remember my ex, he was breaking up with me. When he was breaking up with me, he said, I think you could drive if you really wanted to. And I'm tired of taking you places.
Oh, you have to be kidding me.
Yeah.
How long were you
And
dating him?
that was a couple years or
Because
about
you
a
would
year or
think at
so.
that point, if that person is really invested in the relationship, they would study and learn about your
Yeah,
disability and respect and support it, right?
exactly. And we went to high school together. So that was hard too. But, and I also, there was another person I got involved with. There was just a lot of broken relationships. And I can remember just praying and I said, God, do not send me anybody until it's the right person. And God answered that prayer. He sent me my husband when I wasn't even thinking about it. I was volunteering at our art center and I was walking down the street and he saw me and he's like, oh, who's that girl in that red dress? And I wondered where she's going. Well, it turns out he was already going there to play guitar that night. And we knew mutual friends. And it turns out we got to know each other and we were friends all summer. And he asked me out. And ever since, we were together. And he was the first person on our date that ever asked me, when I told him I have a learning disability, he asked me how that made me feel. And I was able to, there's have been things that it's been a learning curve. We've had to learn a couple things throughout this, but he's definitely the one for me that just helps me and is supportive. And we were friends first, and that made all the difference. And
Right.
when we look back on things, we were at the same place at other events. We just didn't see each other there.
Oh, wow.
So
When it's meant to be, it's meant to be. That's
yes,
serendipity. It's true love. So that's amazing. Um,
exactly.
and I wanted to share this because I also read this on your website. It says adding
Mhm.
wings to caterpillars does not create butterflies. It creates awkward and dysfunctional caterpillars. Butterflies are created through transformation. I love this quote from Stephanie Marshall on your website. When I focus on what I can achieve, I find happiness, which enables me to rise to my full potential. Learning to be content has been the way that I found my wings with a disability. So I just feel like if you can share with us the key tool that that you use for your transformation, I guess, to become the butterfly that you are today, because you really transformed everything around for yourself.
I think it was accepting having a disability was the big thing too, that I had a disability and there was things that I couldn't do, but it was also focusing on the things that I could do. Because when I focus on what I can
I
do,
think that's
it's
the
so much,
key. Yes, yes.
yes, it's so much more empowering and things I love doing. Then I'm a happy, positive person. But when I focus on things I can't do, I'm more negative.
Yeah.
And I can't, there's not some things I just simply can't do, and that's okay. But I try to focus on what I can and what I love to do. And that has just transformed my outlook on my disability and my life.
I think that's a wonderful tool that we are sharing with the listeners today. And that's just for everybody. If we all focus on things that we can do instead of focusing on
Yep.
things that we can't do, it really affects our day to day. It really affects our mind, and
Mm-hmm.
we will just be able to do a lot more with the things, the talents, the qualities that's been given to us that we have. So I love that.
Yes.
Now, Michelle, how have you become an advocate for people with disabilities, and what is your mission for doing what you do?
A lot of the ways I can do advocacy, it looks different in certain situations. If I'm at work, I work with students that have disabilities in the general ed classroom. So sometimes I get that opportunity to share with them when they're frustrated that I know what it's like, and I get to share my story about that. And I get to encourage them and show them how to advocate and speak up for themselves. And I think having that perspective helps. I also get a chance to do that when I write on my blog about life with a learning disability, and getting that chance to connect with others that have disabilities, because sometimes people will say, well, that's my story, or I can relate to that. And that gives
Right.
me a chance to be able to do that. And also at the school too, when I work with students, I can talk with other staff members on maybe some ways that can help them. Like I can
Help the
report
kids.
back.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful. What advice do you have for parents who look at their struggling child and they're not sure what is wrong? They don't want to ignore the signs, but at the same time, they don't want to jump to the wrong conclusions. What's the best way to handle that situation?
One of the things that I would like to, what I definitely see is communicating with their child's school, the professionals, and seeing what is going on, and being really open up with those concerns and
Mhm.
talking about them, and also just looking into that. It doesn't mean just because they might be struggling in an area, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a disability. It could just mean that they're behind in certain areas and they'll catch up. But it can also mean having that disability and finding out early can get them into services and can also help them deal with that. I know my parents explained my disability to me when I was very young, and they said that I have a learning disability and I just learn differently. And hearing that information was really helpful because some of the stuff I was getting at school with my peers wasn't accurate. A lot of my peers were telling me that I wasn't smart. So I think it's just trying to work with the professionals and seeing what is going on and not to give up on them.
I agree. And I think as a child, I mean, like you were saying in kindergarten, when you couldn't do like the connect the dots, those simple things that the kids are doing, so you're fearful. You don't want to like raise your hand
Mm-hmm.
and say, I don't know how to do this. And so you don't feel smart, you feel insecure. So
Mm-hmm.
finally being diagnosed and being given the reason, like this is the reason why you can't do
Yep.
this. It's a huge weight off your shoulder because it's like, okay,
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with me. Like I'm doing the best I can. Now I
Mm.
have a diagnosis that I can learn and try
Yes.
to fight and do better and get the help and the accommodations that I need. So
Yep.
and now you mentioned that the most unhelpful type of assistance is when it's unsolicited. Can you elaborate on that?
A lot of times people will be able to give you advice that sometimes you don't ask for, help that you don't. Now, a lot of times people can't see my disability with math or driving, but sometimes they can see the hand dexterity. I can remember last summer I was in the grocery store and I was unloading my cart, and sometimes my husband will come in and help me if the store is crowded, but it wasn't too crowded that day. And I was having a good day and just unloading the cart, and I had a woman come up to me, and she started a conversation, and she started unloading my cart. And I was just shocked. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. And I said, oh, thank you so much at the end. And she goes, oh, you're welcome. She goes, I like to help people when you look like you really need it. And I think that I didn't know what to say at that point because usually people don't know uh, that that's what's going on.
Right.
And I'm not against getting help, but I think if somebody would say, oh, it looks like you have a full cart here, or do you need help with this?
Right.
I think that goes a long way rather, because I've done that for other people too at the grocery store. I would
Right.
have sometimes elderly people would say, could you get that off the shelf for me? And I don't have a problem with that. I think sometimes the only time I will do an unsolicited type of help is if I'm opening up the door for somebody. And I think that's just a common courtesy
Of
that,
course. Right. Right. No,
but yeah,
that makes sense. And a lot of
yeah.
times people have, just good
Mm-hmm.
intentions and they have no idea. They're just,
Mm-hmm.
but it would be nice to kind of say, oh, do you want me to give you a hand? Something like that, than
Mm-hmm.
just make an
Yes,
assumption. Right. Now, why
exactly.
do you think that often people have difficulty accepting a person with disabilities?
I think sometimes people have a lot of misconceptions about disabilities. Sometimes people will either go into the place of thinking, oh, someone with a disability, well, they can't do anything. And then they feel sorry for them and they have like that pity for them. And then they end up doing a lot more for them because they don't think
Mhm.
they're capable of doing anything. A lot of times people hear learning disability and they think, oh, you can't learn, or how did you go to college and have been successful? And then other times people might think that a person with a disability can do anything if they really try hard enough, and it's a lack of trying. or they think that sometimes people have savant like talents and they should be, that puts the pressure on them to have to perform
Right.
uh, more than they can do. So I think sometimes we get an idea that it's just, we don't get a realistic picture of what a disability is. And when people either go to one extreme or the other, that can really end up hurting a person rather than kind of knowing who the person really is and meeting them in the middle.
Right. Right. So, I mean, what tips do you have for our listeners today if they encounter someone with a disability? What's the best way we can help make that person feel comfortable and accepted?
I think a really good way is to get to know the person and to treat them just like you would treat anybody else. That they're a person that has some things that might give them difficulty, but there's also a lot of good that they can bring in, and to include them and to get to know them and to meet them where they're at and ask them, how can I help you? And I think people would find that we're a lot more alike than we are different.
I agree. That's great advice. Well, Michelle, in summary, your journey exemplifies resilience and strength along the way. You discovered your true adversary wasn't your disability, but rather really the perceptions, both of your own and society's. Life with a disability isn't a narrative of pity or dependency on a cure. Rather, it's a unique lifestyle requiring adaptable strategies. Through acceptance, adaptation, and self education, Michelle has evolved into a person who embraces her full potential with happiness. Her aspiration is to empower herself and inspire others with disabilities to unite in defiance against limitations, refusing to let their disabilities hinder their dreams. Is there anything else you would like to share with us today?
I would just love to encourage people with and without disabilities to know what they want and to be able to find a way to do it. And to remember that success doesn't always come in the package that we often expect, but something even better.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being on Female Fluence. All the links will be in my show notes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today to Female Fluence. Together, we can influence and motivate other mind-like females. Your job is to feel alive, be in control, and always be true to your own self. Please don't forget to subscribe so you can continue feeling inspired. All the links and notes from this episode will be posted on my website, femalefluence.com. Don't forget to also follow me at Female Fluence on both Instagram and Facebook. Lastly, if you are in need of a woman empowerment life coach to help you identify the barriers that keep you from living the life you seek, please send an email to info@femalefluence.org. Remember, my friends, don't just exist, but live your life to the fullest. I'm your host, Pearl Mashur. Until we talk next time.